This is the ADP meeting for Thursday, April 20th. It's 2:05 start time. First on the agenda is to welcome everyone to the Squamish Nation territory. Second on the menu is staff recommendation to adopt today's agenda. Any additions to this agenda that we know of? Looks good. Take a motion to adopt the agenda. Seconded by Derek. All in favor? No opposed? Motion carried. Third, we have the February 16th ADP minutes of meeting. For those that were here, is there any errors or omissions or anything we need to add there?
I had one question,
One question on the
just at the very end about the recommendation, about coming back to ADP, sorry, I can't find it now. The pages here. So page 5, that ADP supports development permit, would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the recommendations discussed at the meeting. It's the second part. I hadn't recalled that prior to the project receiving ADP approval, plan specification as well as further discussion for the parking entrance concerns will need to come back to the ADP meeting. Is anyone else? Is that?
That kind of came after,
Yeah.
I think we made,
Discussion afterwards.
yeah. And I know that was a bit of a precedent setting one. And I
Yeah.
think in hindsight, everyone thought that that would have been appropriate.
Yeah,
And I think, the resolution in that was that way. So I think that's, if we can get that in there, I think that
Okay.
would be important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just wasn't sure, given it wasn't discussed with the comments and everything, if that was.
And are you guys all happy with the way it's worded?
part of receiving.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
coming back to ADP with the focus on the landscape, and the landscape architecture with the present, and further discussion on the parking entrance. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's Carrie's project, so I'll just remind.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
It needs to come back for that.
Okay, so with those changes, motion to adopt the minutes. Seconded.
Yeah.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, first item of business is development permit 444, the Squamish self-storage at 39480 Queensway. Architect L. Pedora Architect and Crown Engineering, they're both here. And landscape architect S. Tennyson, is that right?
Yes.
And KM Civil Consultants. All right. Thanks for coming again, and I'll just leave it up to you guys to start
Yeah,
to start the intro.
I'll do
Perfect.
a really brief intro.
Okay.
So this is the second round for this project in the business park, and there's quite a few comments in the staff report that I drafted up. There's kind of extensive dialogue addressing each of the comments that ADP has made. So, you know, staff are of the opinion that the project's pretty close at this point, and we think they've addressed most of the comments. There's only the 3 kind of departmental comments near the end of the report that I just want to draw your guys' attention that staff is seeking explicit ADP comments on. And the first one is that, you know, there's the overall form and character that talks about having, avoiding a monotonous visual appearance. So we just like ADP's comments on if these revised plans sufficiently address this guideline. Second, there's been an extensive addition of a trellis walkway across almost all the frontage of both buildings. However, this walkway is not covered across the whole thing, so we'd like ADP's thoughts and comments on that. And then the third is we've been in discussion with the applicant. They have proposed this contempo fencing along the south side property line, and to staff it seems like it could be unnecessary from like a security perspective. Everything else is gated. The applicant does not want to eliminate this fence, and they said that, you know, it's part of their incorporated into the retaining wall and how they have to do a lot of elevation on the site. And they think that it provides a high quality finished appearance and kind of ties the whole design together. So we're just looking for ADP's comments on sort of reconciling that discrepancy with regards to the south fence specifically. And so those are the 3 comments. I'm going to pass it along to the applicant now to do their quick presentation, and we'll try to stay on time. So I'll just try to keep an eye on that with Richard's
Yeah,
help maybe.
we'll just
And,
give it an hour kind of for each DP, try to follow that.
Yeah, and you know, let's try to keep the presentation to the 10 minutes, and then we'll move through the questions first and comments.
Okay, I'll just introduce those of us that are at the table here, and then get into a quick slideshow we prepared, and go from there. So, most of us have met last time we were here. My name is Darren. I'm the project manager, looking after the project, trying to keep it organized, everybody working together. This is Larry Padori. He's the lead design architect, and this is Shan Tennyson. She's the landscape architect, and we have an ownership representative here today. So, I'll start the slideshow, and you can.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to make sure that everybody's got the right information in front of them. The Staples set is the sort of comprehensive form and character set, architectural. There's a landscape component which is separate with this black and white sheet on top. And then we brought along the clip set, which is a supplement and update to some of the information that you find in the submission. So please feel free to just unclip it and use the sheet as appropriate. All right. So at the last ADP meeting, we had presented contemporary self-storage project consisting of 2 buildings with a slight offset in the landscape between the 2. It was seen as important to make sure that we would not be creating any traffic issues, and that the circulation around both for pedestrians and for vehicles would be well defined and without conflict. There was some special concern about the rear of the site where we were a little too close to the retained property line, so we've increased that dimension. And we have also, and this is purely for the environmental quality of the development, deleted some spaces. Self-storage and this development does not need the full complement of parking, so we're currently providing 10 loading spaces, and we've reduced the total number of parking by, Dan, do you remember what that was?
How much we removed?
Yeah.
Well, the intent, I don't know how many parking stalls we removed, but we pulled the front of the phase 2 building closer to the street was the main goal. So we eliminated 2 full rows of parking.
Right. So in your submission, you'll see an orange dashed line, which represents the footprint of the second phase building as it was. So you can see that the building has been pushed forward to basically have the 2 phases architecturally more in unison and as one, and reduce the sea of parking in front of them. This is with full support of planning, so I think that has been a major improvement in how the place functions and feels. So Darren, you were running the video, and I think maybe can you just go back and run it again?
Sure.
So that shows you sort of proportionately what is happening on site. It does obviously doesn't include all of the fine landscape design features. Shan's going to talk to that in a moment. So this is just a representation of the massing and some of the added parapet complexities and projections that we strove hard to incorporate, as well as further layering of the facade to bring out the trellis, to bring out the fencing, so that, especially looking at it from Pioneer Way, we have the fence in the foreground, which shields the drive aisle, and then that fence is very much in character with the rest of the buildings behind it. So we think that, again, in terms of stepping up the scale and creating that layered effect, we have addressed some of the concerns or questions that were raised at your last ADP meeting. Okay, next. So this is just an idea about how the building changes character between day and night and how we're incorporating lighting. Architectural lighting on the face of the building is very much coordinated and in concert with the architecture, so that the door recesses and some of the projecting features will be highlighted during the evening from dusk on, so that the character of the place and of the building is maintained even after hours when it's dark. So we have a kind of a before-after show, which attempts to highlight the differences between what you've seen and what you're seeing now. Obviously, the main difference, well, the two main differences is the massing complexity that now breaks up the elevations and brings these features up and over the parapet. Also supplemented with the trellis, which is handled in a very modern way. Concealed bolts, it's all plate connections with a very durable base to make sure that we don't damage it during snow removal, etc. And that happens on all of the street elevations and office frontages and anything that's visible from the public realm. The other salient difference is the color of the walls. There's a little bit of a discrepancy, I think. When we were here last time, I think someone had mentioned that they would be interested in darkening and grounding the building a little more by using darker hues. So that's what we took away from that. But there's also a note, I think, Aisha, from planning, that is looking for a lighter approach. My personal preference is to land somewhere in the middle. What I really liked about the first one is that it created a great deal of contrast between the wall and the very warm wood-like surfaces that are the details, the highlights of the elevations. The darker version is, yes, it's more grounded, very calm and very architectural, but it minimizes the contrast between those two critically important wall materials. So we have a material board here, and I'll just show you quickly. Thank you. So this was the original color. This is the color as represented in the darker one. And I think that it would be worth looking at that compromise solution and something like this, which still maintains a very high contrast, allowing this color to pop visually, and creates a strong enough contrast between the corporate color, the blue-green, and itself. So there was a little bit of uncertainty about which way we want to take the colors, and I think we've got three options that we can discuss.
Yeah, there was actually, I think someone on one side of the table was leaning light, one side of the table was leaning dark, and then there was talk about no paint, which we did talk about as well, which is a challenge for sure. But we can pass this around, I can pop up somewhere. It's not bad. It's a little lopsidedly.
So you will see that in the glass elements that are projecting over the roof parapet, there's a component that is vision glass, and there's an upper component which is a spandrel glass. Both of those are represented on the material board. the emphasis, the building is largely horizontal, but we're making use of those appurtenances or these detail elements to provide an interruption and a kind of a vertical accent to just make it a little more interesting. So we've run through all of the comparisons.
Yeah, I can go through them one more time. if you
Could
like.
just maybe quickly, so we can.
So each one of these are before and after.
And seeing as you'll be asked to comment on the cover of the trellises, the trellises at the entrances will have a glass cover. It's only the length of the trellises that connect to nodal points, like the gazebo in the middle and some of the extremities that are not covered. The logic being that at some point, a pedestrian is going to emerge from under the trellis and have to approach their car in any case. So to cover the entire thing is not really supported by use or by logic, we think. Yes, there is cover, but it is concentrated only at the main entrances at the moment. And so, Sean, maybe since we have limited time for the presentation, we'll turn it over to you and you can talk about the landscape.
Okay, sure. So the highlights of the landscape are at the northwest corner and also at the southwest corner we've added rain gardens, which will assist in the stormwater management for the site. And there was a comment that asked for some riparian planting along the north perimeter of the site, but the slope of that area is actually about going to be 3 to 1. And because of where the property line was in relation to the existing ditch, we were unable to place specifically riparian planting in that area because we didn't believe it would survive because of the dry slope condition. So what we did do is we bumped up the planting there with some native shrubs around the coniferous trees. And the two species that we chose were shrubs that would survive on that drier slope condition. And so they are not riparian, but they are native and should do well there. We use the same kind of shrubs along the west perimeter, south of the rain garden, where again we start to get into more of a 3 to 1 slope, and just to make sure that the material survived, we used plants that would do better and do well in those conditions. The other highlights of the landscape plan is that for maintenance purposes, we have not placed grass in any of the parking medians. We've put shrubs and trees. And the trees should provide some shade for the parking area for people getting in and out of their cars. We do have a seating area that was developed in coordination with the architects, where we have a gazebo over top for some limited, it has a glass ceiling, doesn't it, that area?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay. But there is some overhead structure there to bring some scale and some interest there. And there's some cluster seating where people could sit and enjoy the amenity area. And other highlights of the landscape include we have clusters, large masses of perennial planting, grasses, and some native coneflower that will add some interest. We've also added boulders to retain where we have a slope in places, so that will add some texture and interest. And we have carried over those rocks into the amenity area as well to provide some repetition and some balance in the design. And we have tried to adhere to the SEPTED guidelines by not having a lot of evergreen coniferous trees close to pedestrian areas for safety and security, so you could see through the site. We tried to use higher branching deciduous trees through there. We do have some accent evergreens, but they are not large trees. I think that is about all that we have to discuss on landscape right now. There was a comment about showing details, landscape details for fencing and seating. We have shared these details with architecture on our drawings. So we are showing the chain link fence and the cluster seating on ours, and they have some of the other landscape details on the architecture drawings if you're looking to find them. So.
Thanks, Sean. It's worth also addressing this issue that Asia brought up with respect to the retaining walls and the way that we terminate that enhanced fencing. If you can go back to landscape again. So basically, the area or the detailing question is this one. As you know from our architectural site plan, the enhanced fence that includes cast-in-place elements, wood inserts, and this Contempo steel fencing extends from roughly there along this frontage to the gate. And on this side, after phase 2 is all delivered, and in fact, even before, closing this segment up. The reason that is in place, and it is, again, an enhancement. It actually costs more money to build that wall, but because we have the lock block retaining happening all along here, and we need to mitigate the difference between the elevation of the grade right there on the neighboring property, we do have to have a physical retaining object there. And in our opinion, to have that same wall that creates the context on other sides of the project is vastly preferable and sort of visually more engaging than the lock block. So that's the reason that from here to there, we're going with the architectural fence that also doubles as a retaining.
There's a slide here that to talk about. This helps show that little trellis area and the trellis area.
Yeah, so basically the trellises are joining the main entrances. We've got 2 in phase 2. We've got 1 identified in phase 1. So we're running the trellises through interruption for the vehicular passage, resuming on the other side. This is where the gazebo amenity landscaped area is. Then it terminates in this parking area, and then we have another line of trellises along the phase 2 frontage. So you can see that it's treated very in a modern way, which we think is sympathetic to the architecture of the development. And yeah, there's an added height to the gazebo itself to pop it out of the trellises and make it a special place to be.
And there's
You can use the cursor.
no, it doesn't show up on
It doesn't show up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we'll just cover it verbally. Okay, thanks.
If you,
You should have
Yeah.
told us this was going to be televised. I would have been a lot more nervous.
So this slide shows, this is just some of the details, there's more in the package, but this is some details of what the fencing and the property looks like. And
So you can see that, you know, this is a cast-in-place wall which is painted and treated the same way as the wall in the building itself. This is the wood insert or the long board insert, and then this is the fencing itself, which is a very crisp rectangular steel pre-finish grid. Incidentally, the reason we were asked as one of the changes, and that's why it appears in the supplement, is to minimize the areas of the cast in place because there's a concern that it may be tagged and disfigured. So we've increased the area of the wood and decreased the area of the concrete as much as we could.
thanks. Is there any last comments?
Last request.
Yeah. Trying to ring a bell.
no, I think that's good. Just need to bring it on.
supportive of the before and afters there and the fly-through video. It's very helpful for people that weren't here last time and for us that were. We'll start with questions and then get into comments later, do the round table. So we'll start with questions. First one is talking about the grade difference. What is the grade difference approximately between that neighboring south lot?
It varies, I think, Derek, from a meter and a half to about a meter on the corner.
So we talk about this lot to the south here?
Yeah,
So this is the lot that's currently being developed by Solterra.
yeah.
So it's being brought up. I'm not sure what the exact grade change will be between the two once it's all said and done. The constant or more long-term grade change will be on the east side. This is where that indoor bike park was proposed.
Right.
That seemed to be filtered away. So there's a grade difference of approximately 2 meters, I believe, from one side to the next. So it's not huge. It varies.
Yeah.
So there will be the need for a temporary retaining wall along that side because this site has to be brought up out of the floodplain,
Yeah.
and that's what's driving the higher height is the floodplain.
Okay, so you're 2 meters across the east-west direction. Yeah.
And there
You're-
are site cross sections in the drawing package.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Alright. And your FCL is lower than the Solterra requirement? Is that
Yeah,
right?
it would be at least the same.
At least the same. So, how is it different? Is it because they're gonna be late, or, no, they're building that now, they're filling that lot now essentially to at that elevation. So you see a need for that. There's gonna be a grade difference? I don't see a grade difference if the same FCL is,
On the south, like I said, along the south of the property, I don't think there will be a significant grade difference. We'd have to compare the finished Solterra design grades to our proposed design grades, which is in our site grading
okay,
package
yeah,
from KM Civil Consultants. So we compare those two numbers, we know the exact difference of elevation, but it will not be as significant as on the east because the east side is undeveloped.
yeah, okay, get it.
But I think it's wise to go on the assumption that there will be a grade change, and so to have a strategy in place to deal with it, rather than just let it slump over, right? So-
Yeah. Okay. Number 2 was, has fire department been consulted about circulation here? Yeah.
So we sent them the first versions of the plans, so
Okay.
depending on the outcome of this meeting, because we just don't want to hit them with every
Sure.
variation, we'll send them whatever's kind of finalized before we go to council with the DP.
Okay, perfect, perfect. On building 1, it looks like there's 2 small car, or possibly 3 small car parking along the north side there.
For the recess?
In the recess, in the part of the middle of the building. It looks like there's also storage garage door openers there.
Are you talking about right in here?
No, on the north against Pioneer. Is north, that's north, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. Are those parking stalls?
Yeah, they're parking stalls just to try to fit as many stalls as we can for bylaw compliance, which we are under because we're getting pressing a variance from council, which is supported by staff. But those are also just for people to park and use while they're accessing the lockers if they want to get out of the way.
Are those lockers right in the front as well?
Yeah, there would be lockers all the way along this wall. Yeah, that's right.
Well, we're shown, we have sections of wall that are not lockers.
Right.
Yeah, there's a solid section right here. The facade is broken up, right,
Yeah.
to provide some relief.
Okay, so you have parking in front of the garage, or the
Correct.
storage opening.
That's correct.
And last one is the hallway width inside. What width is that?
5 feet.
5 feet? Okay. Okay, that's my questions.
Yeah, you covered off my questions about the grades, so I don't have any questions.
What is the infill material on the Contempo fence? Is it like a
The-
mesh?
Like the fencing itself,
Yeah, like the mesh. It looks like a,
it's like a steel picket fencing. So, you know, vinyl chain link fencing has the angled patterns. It's a Contempo vertical and horizontal pattern.
bar.
Bar, steel bar, yeah.
What size bar? Do you know?
I don't know, eighth of an inch.
Okay, so it's substantial, like bar grade almost.
Yeah.
It's not,
It's not a wire. It's
Wire
not
mesh,
cable.
okay.
It's a steel.
okay. Maybe just one general one for landscape. Can you talk a bit more about the rain garden corners, how those actually are benefiting the stormwater? Are they catching all or what portion of the park and surface water, or are they overflow measure?
Well, they will be catching some stormwater from the parking lot. The civil engineer is or will be showing curb cuts at both ends, and he's also putting lawn basins in as well to hold the water in case we have too much.
So how?
But there's
how-
no actual, sorry, Darren.
No, go ahead.
There's no actual outlet connecting to the sanitary system.
Yeah, so how they work is, so for example, this rain garden in this corner here, the civil engineers designed as much of the parking area as possible that would naturally drain into there through a curb cut. Same thing for this side, we would drain the parking area into it. The only other way to increase capacity into these gardens would be to run like a storm line from the roof into these areas. We've done that in the past with some success. Just basically dumping more water into it, but the roof water is already clean, right? So there's no reason to really filtrate that through a rain garden in a Boswell.
Yeah, other than I guess the delay of stormwater kind of surge. It's a big roof area was what? Roof area and site area. So that was my next question was.
Yeah, there's some delay through the rain garden, but if you
Not
put too much
much.
water into it, not much, because it will need an overflow.
So
right? Because-
otherwise, is all the roof going directly to storm then? Currently?
Correct, yeah.
And then the paving surface for everything, it's on there somewhere, I'm sure, but what is the paving surface for all the drive aisles? Asphalt? And that's it for questions.
I had a lot of questions. The color that's in here is like Benjamin Moore's City Shadow, the new proposed one. Is that the same as what's on the sample board over there? For some reason
That
that it
should be a relatively close to it.
looked like it was a different, like it looks a different color in the renderings, but I'm just wondering if that's an actual sample.
Apologies, this darker color is called urban chic.
Okay, I thought it
or
was
street
different.
chic. See, it's 45.
Okay. Oh, the spacing at the back of the building that we had an issue with before, with the width of it, I see now it looks like it's gone to
Yeah.
5.78 meters, but what was I don't see the measurement of what it was previously.
We widened it by, I think, 1.5 meters, 5 feet.
5 feet,
Okay.
because the whole scheme is 5-foot modules. So.
Okay.
We basically removed a row of lockers off the end of the building, essentially, when we were to look at it. So there's enough room for 2 vehicles to pass by.
Okay. And that's all my questions.
All of my questions have been asked already.
I have a few questions on section AA in between Pioneer Way and the building. Can you tell me what the grade change is there?
I don't have a set of drawings in front of me. Do you have a full set?
Sorry, what was the question?
He's asking what the grade change is, so we need to look at the site section with the civil drawing.
Drawing number 8, 2.3.
Have you had a chance to review the site grading plan that was submitted?
Yeah, I have, but I just wanted to get a number from you guys there.
So again, which area are you inquiring about?
Between Pioneer Way
Mhm.
and where the fence is, bottom of that fence, what do you see as the height difference there? Elevation?
So between Pioneer Way, the existing topography is currently at around 4.7 meters on average. At the property line, the grading would be at about 5.2 meters. and then up to 7.5 meters at the bottom of the fence.
So we're looking at about a 3-meter change in height between the street and where the fence is. And then we're, if my understanding is correct, we're looking at a 7.5-foot fence on top of that.
Is the fence 8 feet? 6
The
feet?
fence is about 6 feet, I believe.
7'6", yeah, 7.5 feet.
Thank you. My next question is, you showed some landscaping on top of the roof. There's no roof plan that is provided that show the extent of that I could see. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
We are not planning any landscaping on the roof.
What we've done is we've provided planting at the base of the trellises with the idea that they can grow up to the top of the roof and grow over the roof parapet.
I have drawings that show planting on the roof.
Yeah, I think that's an extension of what's planted on the ground. So it would grow up the wall and onto the roof.
Okay.
It's difficult to plant directly on it.
During at the previous meeting, we discussed having suggestions were made regarding permeable driving surfaces like permeable concrete that so that the water can just go, basically wide varieties can go through. Have any of those features been incorporated into this?
We aren't proposing any now. Those were discussed and could be a suggestion. We'd have to look at the cost of that material versus paint.
Can you tell me what green initiatives have been incorporated in this?
The rain garden and the living planting on the wall.
And the plant material is, we have tried to incorporate some native plant material,
And I
which
think
would require less maintenance and be more hardy.
and going to the parking, and that can be also a green initiative, is reducing the area of parking in the first place. It probably does a great deal more than the floor surface of 2 or 3 times the parking area due to the coverage on the site and the fact that we have been reducing the parking due to the use that we're proposing. I think the storm runoff is greatly minimized.
Yeah, we discussed the green a little bit in our last meeting, and our response to that was the rain gardens. We've added a second one. And I also explained a little bit at that time about the nature of the self-storage itself, is it's very low impact, very sustainable, very green from a consumption standpoint. All the lighting, for example, all the lighting in the entire facility is on motion controls. So the light's never on unless there's somebody in there, right? So a lot of things like that as well.
And did you talk about the roof material?
It would be a ballasted EPDM roof, standard for industrial construction.
And go with light aggregate
Like white or
or
gray?
high reflectivity as well.
The membranes are usually gray, but it's ballasted with rock, right? Covered with rock.
Okay, my next question is the glass panels on the facade. How do you see this fitting into the Squamish typical architecture that you see here and the new architecture that's coming into town? Is there any architect you can refer to? Is there how do you see this being grounding the building to Squamish as something that works with the West Coast or anything like that?
I think that there is place for all kinds of different architectural expressions within the idiom of the region. So being contextual means making use of wood, but the use of wood does not have to be regimented to follow a 15-degree slope with a flying roof on a portable. It can be an expression that uses wood in a different way as we're proposing here. So I believe that it fits very well, particularly with the addition of the walkways and trellises. And let's please not lose track of the notion that this is an industrial building, a very high efficiency, low energy consumption industrial building that has a significant life in it as well due to the office component. And so again, I think personally, I think it fits in the community, both in the community of forms in the park and as a regional expression of woods and masonry construction.
The wood trellis work that you guys are proposing, I didn't pick up that you said that it's cedar. Is it supposed to be, you guys proposing solid cedar?
The trellises are cedar, rough on cedar.
Yeah, and the posts?
Yes, same.
That's also the same, okay. I think that's all my questions, thank you.
Okay. Questions? We move on to comments. I'll start with comments. The first one would be regarding drainage and roof. The parking lot has decreased in size, but it looks like the building's bigger on building 2 anyways. And there's no capture of roof drainage, so that goes directly to the storm, I imagine. So I think the runoff is the same if it's asphalt or roof. Possibly there could be an opportunity to put a slow runoff weirs on the roof structure so that the roof does detain some peak flow but drains slowly. The second comment might be on the plan, interior plan of building 1. Right as you come into the main from your elevators into building 1, it looks like there's a wall, it's probably for fire or something, that separates one side from the other. And there's only a single door. Could that be a double door? See, building 2 has a double door going towards the west or east side. Just where the elevators are, there's a single door that goes towards the east.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like a long wall there. Could that just be a double door, like the
Yeah,
building 2?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That's my comments.
I wasn't here the first time you guys came to the advisory design panel, but I would just comment that I like the changes you made to the elevations. And then my only other comment would be it's hard to comment on the fence along the south property line without knowing the grades of the Solterra property and without seeing a cross-section through there and how the two kind of interact. So without that information, it's hard to comment on that.
Fair enough. Yeah, the grades should be quite similar though. 2 recent projects, both under our new flood management FCL requirements, so we
Yeah.
should be
Just,
quite.
it would be worth checking that before approving that. That's it.
Okay. Derek?
Not sure what the right comment is, but I agree with Richard that I wish there was some more stormwater management measures, which are what I was kind of getting at with the question of the rain gardens. I think it's important they're not gestural. Like here's our token. I'd love it if you knew what capacity of the site they are deferring or delaying from the stormwater, because the parking's one thing. I think the bigger issue with the site is the amount of roof plane. And if it has no delay, it's great, it's EPDM and going to be a little more reflective than a block roof, but going straight to stormwater, I think it would be great from the district standpoint if they could push a intermittent measure to delay that, or a filtration pit somewhere.
Does the panel understand that the stormwater is required to go through a detention system prior to city service?
So what is that on site then?
That's on the 3rd page of the civil engineering set, so you see this big box here.
Mhm.
That's an underground Brentwood detention system, so all the stormwater on the whole property has to go through that
Okay.
before it's supposed to store.
Okay.
That's an engineering requirement.
And then I can elaborate that our subdivision and development control bylaw requires that every site designed to the Q100, so it's a really high standard
Okay.
that the district requires of every development.
Okay, so that's probably what
We're
I
kind
missed
of
in
on
my...
it through our engineering department at later stages in the development process.
Okay.
So anything that goes into the rain gardens that does not naturally perk has to go through the.
Okay, perfect. I'd love to see some areas, I know some developments we've seen in the past. I know it's probably unfeasible to do all permeable concrete or pavers for the whole site because it's a large area, but I know some developments have made an effort, whether it's in the parking stalls or in the pedestrian areas, to at least get some permeability in there. Helps delineate crosswalks or pedestrian areas, so I think that's doable with any budget. There's lots of ways we can do that, I'm sure. I'm definitely concerned, it's to no fault of yours, I think, but the sectional difference from Queens kind of up to these elevated sites, and then to add the fence in that. So I'm not sure, maybe you can speak a bit to the allowance of the
Only that we
fence.
struggle with, I mean, it's just how do you resolve that without eating up the entire developable area to get a nice
It's more the
grade
fence at the
and-
top, because I think the grade,
Yeah.
and as crude as those sections are, it's, if it's planted and landscaped, I think could be nice, and we're gonna have to deal with it on every project. So I think, again, it's like precedent setting, but the issue I have is then, we're then fencing at quite a high fence. Are you allowed a 7.5-foot fence? I thought 6 foot was the max.
I think it's different for industrial properties actually, but I'm not 100% sure of our regs.
Also, along that south area, we do have a planting bed adjacent to the wall and fence, and we do specify some vines that could grow up on the fence and screen it a bit, and also are growing downwards on the wall.
Yeah, I think
If
it's
that
more on
would
the
help.
north and the
So-
west.
So along the north
street
here,
sides.
along the north here, this is a 6 meter plus landscape setback. right?
Yeah, I can see that in the section, but I think as Derek pointed out, I mean, we're like a 10-foot high barrier from sidewalk up.
17.5 feet, yeah,
Is that?
in total from the street, yeah.
And I know some of that's out of control, i.e. floodplains, and it's a challenge, and I think you're trying to deal with that and still fit the buildings. I just have an issue with the fence, but if it's allowed within the bylaws, there's not much we can comment on. And then sticking on the fence, I mean, I'd love to not see the chain link fence. I appreciate the effort to do a more crafted fence. Yeah, so wherever possible, I'd love to see that. I would prefer the cast in place concrete over the wood kind of infills, but maybe that's just preferential. So
Well,
just
I
because it's
think
getting
that-
busy,
Yeah, but the previous comment was that
Yeah.
it would be really graffiti prone.
I think
to
they'll
have that
graffiti
long
over
stretch.
anything, won't they? Maybe? I wasn't here for that last meeting, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The actual architecture, I don't mind. I think given what it is, it's an industrial storage box. There's quite a bit of effort to articulate it and kind of put some quality materials. And same for the arbors and trellises. I mean, I think that's not often seen on these types of budgeted projects, so I think that's got to be somewhat commended. And that's it.
Okay, I wasn't here for the previous version, but I think that this second rendition is much more appealing. I don't have many comments, other than I too think that the fence, particularly along Pioneer Way, is going to be extremely high. And given like that the Sandman is there, the hotel, looking back that way is going to be not all that friendly. And then my only other comment is in the amenities area where there's going to be tables and chairs, is if one of the tables can have one of the seats removed so that it can be accessible.
Absolutely, yeah, and just to address your first comment on that north fence, there are a number of trees that are going to be fairly tall over time and fill out nicely. That will, if you didn't like the look of the fence or the thought that it's going to be this big thing on top of the hill, they're going to screen it pretty nicely. Even at the beginning, our conifers are 2.5 meters high to start. And so I think it will be nicely screened with softening landscape material to help with that situation.
And I'm not sure we're going to be coming back to the fence, further to the fence. We are spending a lot of resources, design resources and financial resources to make this fence part of the architecture, part to mitigate it looking like a fence. we do need security. There has to be a barrier, there has to be a fence there for this project to function. So what we're doing is we are spending a lot of effort to try and relate it to the architecture and to try and make more of it than just a pure utilitarian fence. So I'm hoping that, whether you like it or not, that you at least appreciate that that is where we're going with that.
That's not my comments.
I was here for the last meeting, and although I never had a problem with the sort of cubic form of the original building, I do think this is an improvement too. I like the integration of the glass, the vertical form of the glass, helping to break it up and provide some reflective qualities. I think that will look good. I like the improvements in the fence, the removal of the majority of the chain link too. I think will make it look more quality. I have the same concerns about the height on the north and east elevation, but I also hear what you're saying about the need for the security there. I would want to make sure that there was a, whether it was coatings or whatnot, but that not just the concrete, the cast in place concrete, but also even the longboard just being a screen. I'm sure somebody could find some way to tag that or deface it or something to that effect too, so that there is some proper maintenance and upkeep that's put on those. Otherwise it could end up looking pretty terrible. Color, I much prefer the darker form. I was one of the people who was pretty vocal about that for a variety of reasons. But I think that your concern about it not providing as much of a contrast with the wood, that could be controlled by moving it away from it being such a brown gray and moving it a little bit cooler is going to provide a better foil for that warm cedar tone of the wood. Will make it not blend in, but still keeping the actual tone of the color darker. The alternate color that you've proposed on the sample board, that will read virtually the same as the original color. It's like there's a line that gets crossed and then everything is going to look like a light color. It's going to be very reflective. So I don't think that color that's on the sample board in particular will actually look that dark.
Compromise.
No, I don't think the compromise should be done. I think
That's
the deeper color should be stuck with, because that's still not a very dark color in and of itself. I'm concerned with the trellis without any cover over that, with the cedar, again, weathering and wear and tear with the climate around here too. Again, there would need to be a plan for properly maintaining the finish on that so it doesn't end up looking very worn quickly. And I think that I'm happy to see the improvement over the width of the access at the back of the building. This was a good compromise to make sure that doesn't become a bottleneck back there. That's all my comments.
With regards to the landscape, I think the adjustments to the planting plan are really positive. The introduction of a lot of native species and conifers, I really appreciate taking the time to look at that. In terms of the fence, I appreciate that it's trying to reflect the building. I struggle myself with the concrete, and we seem to be just having some different opinions on that, but it seems to be a very large, very powerful wall. And I hope that there would be an opportunity to work with staff to find a detailing opportunity to limit that wallness when appropriate. If there's wood, maybe the wood could be designed in a way that there's still a lightness to this fence, that it doesn't feel to be quite so uninviting while still being secure. I appreciate the security requirements, but it feels like a very big wall to me as opposed to a fence. So I would encourage working with staff to finding a solution to that.
My comments is that I think a 7.5 foot fence is there to prevent things like a smash and grab, someone throwing a brick through a window, grabbing something and running away with it. This building does not lean itself towards something like that. I think the fact that we don't have the fence on the west side also shows that you can deal with your security with motion sensors, with lights coming on and sound coming on with people as they approach the building, never mind when they're against the building. I think the fence creates a sense of unsafety. It makes people think this must be an unsafe environment because look at this crazy fence. That's the softest way that I can put it. It's totally out of context in this environment. It makes it look like a prison. This is not the right site for a prison. And so I think it does not lend itself to the Squamish, the people who live here, and to the environment that this is in. When none of the other buildings have something that is so hard and it really pushes people away. And I think that leans towards what other people have said in this, that the fence doesn't fit in here. I think a 3-foot fence will keep out 90% of people that want to stay out of here. People who want to get over the fence will get over the fence anyway. If they want to damage the building, they'll do it anyway, whether it's a 7'6" fence or a 3-foot fence. I think one of the two buildings can be light and one of the can be dark, and that would help to reduce the monotonous, big, massiveness of the two buildings being the same color. I am disappointed that the driving surface couldn't have been the solution to the stormwater as a passive measure that will just always work and be able to deal with the problem. It's nice to see some of the changes that's happened to the elevations and that the plans have been resolved to the extent that exits and those things have, for the most part, have been dealt with. The building is kind of what it is, but I think on the north and the south side, then you can get away without the fence and have the fence only on the less visible sides, like between the two buildings and maybe on the east side. And I think being smart about the colors will help reduce it so that you don't have that monotonous, continuous, massive, enormous building look and feel. Any comments?
Perfect. Okay. Yes, we
I just
Yeah,
have one
sorry.
more comment. Is actually, I would like to have the fence on the south side start where the gate is, if it does need to be there. Like I think that having a visual line to look down Queensway and it not be suddenly there's going to be stopped by a giant wall is going to make it seem a bit more open. That's it.
Is there anything about corner visibility in landscaping and any concerns about that for traffic?
So that's not really a true corner, in that southwest side.
Right, and on this
Yeah.
side it's something.
So they're meeting all of our bylaw requirements for visibility.
And I think removing that's what you're just speaking to now,
Yeah.
the portion of fencing here. Larry tried to explain what we're trying to do there is draw everything together with chaining, etc. Living without that portion of fence is certainly not going to cause functional issues. The fence around the rest of the property, I'll just give you a really quick spiel. It's easy to say, well, if someone wants to get in there, it's going to damage the building, they're going to. But self-storage is all about security, locking your goods under protection. You pay to have, once it's treated like an airport, either public side or air side. So once you're air side, once you're on the storage side, no one's in there without a code, period, end of discussion. So there are problems in facilities where people will drive a vehicle right into a locker. You see it in stores, it's no different. They'll start in a storefront, they'll just drive a vehicle right through the door and steal whatever's in the locker that they might feel like stealing. So the intent is to have it as to be that secure environment. So could we live without fences? No. But I think we can certainly go back to the drawing board and work with staff to limit them to be as least impactful as possible.
The impact on that.
Just hold on. The initial proposal did propose a less impacted fence that you could more visually see through. which is more of a septic principle, like a chain link or mega fence. You can still see through it. We had designed this fence architecturally to match the building, not only to make it look less like a fence, but also use it as part of the building facade. So, like Larry described, it isn't a fence, it's the building, it appears that way. So, we'll certainly work with staff and look at that more.
The amount of times that someone is going to drive through, trying to drive in a lot, that you're going to deal with situations like that, I don't feel justifying the impact on the community to have a building with such a big fence around it. So in between those two, yes, you're going to deal with some level of crime independent of that fence. I don't think that people here need to feel that their stuff is any more secure than what the Home Depot stuff is inside of the Home Depot. They are not dealing with any major crime or theft or anything like that. I cannot see why this would be any different. But how the building presents for people driving by there, are they going to feel this is a Squamish, this is an outdoor environment, or are they going to drive by like, holy, this must be an unsafe place. Why is that place so? Or you make it a target, you're saying, like these guys must have something very, very valuable in there and draw attention to it.
I think it's pretty common for any self-storage place to be fully fenced.
Yeah, I just don't know if
I don't
it's
think
necessary.
that's
Are there
Yeah,
ones
but-
in Squamish, correct?
The other ones are not,
Where are the other ones in Squamish?
along Queensway on the right.
The one is, the one that's on
One
the
of them
east
is.
side, or sorry, the west side, yeah, that backs onto the rail yards. Is that black tusk?
Yeah, the ones in Whisper doesn't have any fences around
It's
it.
fenced, fully fenced with chain link.
Yeah.
The newer one is like south of the Ford dealership. It's not super visible because it's just galvanized. Yeah, but it is. Yeah.
I think the discussion's amplified because of the grade change too. So
Massively, yeah,
yeah,
massively.
I don't think I can even wrap my head around what that looks like, and it's a challenge in this whole neighborhood with the floodways and stuff. We're dealing with that grade change. Like, it's too bad you couldn't use the grade change as part of your barrier or fence. I'd almost rather see that. So there's a 10-foot berm and a big drop or something. I'm not sure. What staff's what has been the discussion
We
around
are
the fence?
limited to what can be constructed within the
Yeah,
floodway.
no, I understand.
There's a 6-meter floodway, so you cannot build into it.
Possibly minimizing the amount, especially on the Pioneer, the north side of it, but minimizing those panels. Like, I understand what you mean about wanting to break it up and make it look integrated into the building, but having a certain amount of transparency through it that's provided by the actual metal component, the grading component of the fence, is actually beneficial in this way, in this sense, because visually it won't continue that sense of a wall going up
Well,
there.
we'd be happy to just make it that,
You can
that
see,
metal.
you can actually see on the drawing, how much of the fence is transparent, how much of it
Mhm.
it's for the most part transparent. It's
Yeah.
not solid for its entire life.
I think,
There's an elevation of it in the set of drawings as well.
and I think staff for that 6-meter setback, I think, and the landscaping in there, I think will go a long ways. Where in other situations, driving along Queensway, some of the new stuff, the rock stack wall is like
Mhm.
right adjacent to the sidewalk, and it's like kind of ridiculous. So I think having that really gradual berming combined with the landscaping will actually probably go a long ways. But I can see both sides of the story, and I do understand that like fencing and the optics are really important to the applicants. So.
Okay, well, we should probably wrap it up here. We've talked about form and character, pedestrian circulation, weather protection, and fencing. I think we've got our comments. We should probably make some motion here. We've got 4 recommendations. I can just read them here. Number A is that the ADP supports the project as presented and does not need to see this project return for further review. B is that the ADP supports the project as presented, would like the applicant to work with the staff to resolve the following recommendations. see ADP supports the project as presented. We'd like the applicant to resolve those recommendations and return to ADP, and that we don't support it at all, so B or D. So do we have to run through those recommendations again? Can we, or? Okay, B. Right, yeah, okay, so I'll make a motion that we adopt number B, that we support it, and that the applicant can work with staff to resolve our recommendations. Seconded. Do we have a discussion on this?
I have one comment. I feel the risk of, if these guys have to come back 3 years from now and say, we've been broken into 3 times, we need a fence. Not only do they not spend the money on the fence right now, but we don't run the risk of the fence being unnecessary and still having that massive impact on the neighborhood. I feel there's very, very little risk in saying, just take a step back from the fence, we're not throwing it out the window, let's just see if it's the massive issue, security-wise, that what the fear is, that is driven by fear and not by, because I feel if you drive past something that is that visually invasive, it sets a tone in the neighborhood that you cannot take away, which I feel is nowhere else in that neighborhood.
Can I address that for a second?
Absolutely.
So just to counter that
Yeah, absolutely.
somewhat
That's fine.
though, I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. I believe that making the fence more transparent, black grading, visually will disappear when it's looked at from the outside. But even as I'm saying, obviously I'm a woman, but just in terms of people going into the facility alone, accessing especially one of the outdoor bins, I know that, and I am not a paranoid person, but I would feel vulnerable opening up my storage locker with potentially tens of thousands of dollars worth of my belongings in it, and knowing that pretty much anybody could walk up behind me at any time. That, I think, for the people that are using it, I think it provides them some access to their things, loading, unloading, being able to know that they can walk away from their car, and that only people that actually are working there and using the facility themselves are going to be able to get access to your things. So I think to not have a fence there at all would actually impact, like, personally, my sense of whether or not I would want to use that facility.
I totally agree. I totally understand where you're coming from. I also think that, especially in this community, the amount of times that you're going to have a physical attack by someone now becomes a minute case of that almost never. And I don't say a fence should be totally removed. I think that they can get away with a 3-foot fence. There's cameras everywhere, there's motion detectors, there's lights, there's the whole works. So it's not like, and you're still in Squamish, it's not like you're in South Africa or in Venezuela.
Or you're inside the building and your storage unit's inside that you've got. I mean, that's what I find hard to wrap my head around, is at the west side that has no fence, the building is the fence, and you go through a gate to get in the back. So if it kind of works there, I mean, I understand Derek's point. I think it is precedent setting and it's a challenge, because right now the business park is kind of great with the types of uses that are in there, that it is quite porous and open. People park over at the climbing gym and walk to the brewery and walk across, and I think that's what the intent of the district is for this Alterra development, right? That's a neighborhood, what's it called, grocery eating area, you know, the clock tower one, it's called something. Anyways, it's meant to be the community hub, so all of a sudden the site's not porous, and maybe it's just so specific to this use that we're having to struggle with. It's probably one of the last types of this use that's going to come through. There's been a lot of efforts to dissuade self-storage units from being proposed, so yeah, I'm not sure how fair it is. I think it's obviously just comments. I'm just not sure if we can push back hard enough on that.
Could staff offer like that they will work to reach a compromise that's maybe a less impactful fence and additional landscaping or something
More heavily
else?
screened with landscaping. The 7-foot high is a challenge for me.
Does it have to be that high? Like, I mean,
5 foot's pretty high. You got to climb.
yeah.
Do you guys have a comment?
It could be 6
Maybe
foot.
Which is at least in line with residential sidewalks.
Yeah, I think that even that foot and a half difference, it would make an impact, especially on those.
Saves
The
some
the
money.
height of the fence that was proposed was with the facade of the building, it wasn't, we need a 7.5 fence to design it.
And then all transparent, is that kind of,
The original proposal was a steel ticket from Temple.
I think the efforts to make it architectural is good.
Yeah.
I think it is. Otherwise, it's a barricade, so I think there's some effort there. And they've obviously been accommodating the comments in the past, so we can't fault them for that. I think the height and some significant effort to screen that, like we do in like other CD zones.
and in multifamily too, we
You
run
have
into
to
the
screen
same
it.
problem with
Yeah.
multifamily, so.
So those fences always have to be screened to full length. Usually carry a bill about, right? So if we could do those, I would feel more comfortable that it's at least not ideal, but given the use, I think there's.
Yeah.
So more continuous landscape screening and lower the height to the 6 feet, is that?
And maybe just looking at the length of the solid panels, whether 20 feet is appropriate right at the very public space, or is that more appropriate more on the private side, or, you know, just looking at those proportions and where it's most public.
You won't be able to screen the south fence line adjacent to Solterra. 'Cause that fence is on
The-
property, right?
So that's a combination of the Contempo and then the chain link.
Right.
And then they've done plantings on that side that will be climbing vines that
Right.
we're hoping will fully screen once they grow
Ah, I
in.
see.
I think that's the intention.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they'll also grow downwards over the wall.
Right.
Retaining wall that'll be there, and the fence is also acting as a guardrail barrier too. The wall exceeds a certain height, and we have to have something there.
Yeah, I mean, that retaining wall, as ugly as it's gonna be, is kind of a temporary measure, unfortunately, until Solterra fills against it, right? We're gonna see it a lot, so there's only so much you can.
Which, yeah, this, they're seeing too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
feeling that. Okay, well,
Can I just added to that motion, I could just read it back.
sure.
Sure, that'd be great.
So advisory design panel supports the project in general, would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the recommendations as outlined in the comments about specifically as they pertain to the height of the fence and increased continuous landscape screen.
Perfect.
Oh, word.
No, that's great.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah.
Okay, well, second, do I see a seconder on that? Shannon?
Shannon and Sarah, wasn't it?
Shannon?
Yeah,
I think we
Sarah?
did, yes.
Okay,
Do it again.
Yes.
all in favor? Opposed? 0. Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. Number 2 on the business is the next development permit 445 at Sitka Lane, 38459 Buckley Avenue. The architect is AKA Architecture and Design. The landscape architect is Considered Design Inc. They're both here. Perfect. Thank you, and I'll let Carrie introduce the project.
Yes, I'm Carrie Hamilton, planner here at the district. And the report here presents a development permit application for 5-unit townhouse development located on 38459 Buckley Avenue. The proposed development is located in Development Permit 7, and that's the multifamily residential, and is subject to the applicable development permit guidelines, which you can find in your report in Schedule A at the end of that report. So given the amount of setback variances requested for this property, planning staff are not in support of this development as it has been proposed, and has encouraged the applicant to review other options such as rezoning for a compact apartment building or moving one of the townhouses. So staff is seeking ADP specific recommendations today on a few different pieces, so I'll flip to which are highlighted in your report. One of them is around street orientation. So DPA 7 states that multi-unit residential buildings and their component units should be oriented to the fronting public street as much as possible. So staff is seeking ADP suggestions to ensure the street frontage design of both the building and the landscaping meet that intention of the guideline. Setback and view impacts. So DPA 7 states that the siting and height of multi-unit residential buildings should ensure that view impacts from adjacent residential developments are taken into consideration and minimized. Staff is not supportive of the front setback variance as it conflicts with this guideline. Staff is seeking ADP's comments regarding compliance with the development permit guidelines. Usable open space. The District of Squamish zoning bylaw general regulation states that at least 40 meters squared of usable open space be provided per townhouse dwelling. A variance is required at only 31 meters squared per unit. A variance to allow for open space in the front setback would be staff supportable if the space is usable and activated. So staff is seeking ADP's comments regarding activation of that front setback open space. Drive aisle width. The district bylaws require minimum 6-meter laneway access for fire and require a 6.5-meter drive aisle width. Both the landscaping along the north lot line and the garbage totes location seem to encroach into these required drive aisle widths, and staff is concerned about adequate drive aisle widths within the site plan and are seeking ADP's specific review and recommendations around that. Lastly, landscaping. The DPA 7 states that the landscaping must be provided along all property lines except for access points. Landscaping should be sympathetic to the surrounding neighborhood, and all areas not used for buildings or parking must be landscaped and curbed. The applicant has proposed to use the adjacent site's north property line landscaping screening as their south property line landscape screening. So and I've attached that landscape screening from the adjacent property on the back of this report, and I printed them out in 11 by 17 if you wanted to see those. But so staff is seeking ADP's evaluation to ensure the south property screening is adequate to meet the development permit guidelines for this particular property. I had a few for the landscape architects if you want to see that.
The architects like class 2.
There's 3 of them, you can check. If you want one.
Oh, you guys can go
I'll just
first.
look at it. And that's it for staff, so I can pass it to Jane.
Thank you.
Can I just go back here? Yeah.
Yes. So basically, I'll just start with the cover page where we've shown the overall building facade from the drive aisle. So this is basically the garage side, and we have a unique end unit which we hope will address some of the planning concerns around the street frontage along Buckley. This is the face now that is facing Buckley, so we've just wanted to show that we've embellished that front facade, or that facade, so that it feels more like a front than a side, and I'll talk about that a bit more. Now, in terms of our site planning rationale, it is, we have a few reasons why we thought this might be a reasonable site plan. One is due to the irregular shape of the lot. It is difficult to somewhat capture the development, what's permitted by the zone is difficult to capture due to the irregular shape of the lot. So basically right now what we're proposing meets the site coverage. The site coverage permitted is 33%, we're at 28%. You are permitted a FAR 0.6, which we're meeting, and we are below the maximum gross area permitted. The other thing I want to show is just the neighborhood itself. It's not just that it's an irregular shape lot. The neighborhood itself is a little bit irregular as well. This is the footprint of the existing home. So you can see that that front of that building already extends beyond the required front yard setback line. So this is, just to be clear, this is the front setback required, and then this is what we're proposing, this blue line. So we're actually, and I shaded this area, it's a bit hard to see, but it's this kind of irregular shape that extends over the required setbacks. It's just a small corner of that building. In the back, we are actually extending into the rear setback as well. But if you look at our argument is that we're still meeting the lot coverage requirements. And just to give you a little bit of context too, sorry, this drawing doesn't show up in your package.
just put this together, but, you know, I thought you might be interested in seeing just how it relates to the, what we're calling the Arbutus Grove townhomes, which are under construction right now. So most of the existing neighborhood is built well below the FCL. So a lot of these homes appear lower because, you know, when we are designing today, by today's standards, we need to meet the FCL requirements. So that means that our main floor living spaces are floor higher. So this is basically, you know, due to today's FCL concerns, our new buildings are higher than the existing homes in the area. But as you can see, and actually this context photo, does everyone kind of know where this is? So this is the house on Secondary. This is an existing crosswalk through here, and you can just kind of see the, I'd say, somewhat neglected nature of that sidewalk, which is a good indication of the state of the neighborhood in general. So it's hard to know exactly what to relate to. So we do think we are at least trying to relate to the adjacent development, the Arbutus Grove townhomes. So once we get past that, the typical townhome designs are fairly, well, they're quite typical for a townhome format. The project goal for this was to create some good quality, spacious feeling homes that could accommodate the needs of young and growing families within Squamish. And we do believe that the neighborhood is very desirable for families being in proximity to a lot of the amenities like the school and transit, grocery stores, etc. So the idea was to create these double wide garage spaces that, you know, provide enough storage space for the typical Squamish family. And the end unit, so this is a unit facing Buckley. So on this end unit, and also to try to keep it as much as possible out of the, from encroaching over the front setback, we've created a more unique end unit here. Now, we didn't want to cut it back by too much because we felt there was a lot of value to being able to provide a double wide garage space, that we thought that was quite crucial to being able to attract or to provide the kind of long-term housing solution that we wanted to. So on the end unit, the front door is approached from the side, and essentially the rest of the unit is substantially similar to the others. So you have your top floor with 2 bedrooms, a master bedroom with ensuite. I think fairly typical for a Squamish townhome. The other feature that we put in, which also meets the roof height calculations for this neighborhood, is this rooftop deck area. I think the unit plans are in your packages. These are the elevations. So we're mostly using, at the ground floor plane, we're using mostly horizontal wood siding. The materials above are all hardy fiber cement boards, so either in the plank or shingle format. We've kind of grouped the windows together and tried to just create a kind of a simpler facade overall. We do have some bays that project over the garage space, or sorry, the front of the building. This is another elevation of the building facing onto Buckley. Sorry, and just before we get further along, Carrie pointed out the fire. Oops.
Oh.
Fire lane. Possibly.
Happens every time I open up the drive.
Yes. Yeah, there is a little bit of flexibility within the site plan to move the drive aisle closer to the garage doors, and that would give a little more space to the fire lane. As it is right now, the totes would be lined up partially onto that driveway. The offset would be then having 0 apron at the garage doors. The other possibility, that was a garbage pickup solution that we had suggested for Arbutus Grove, because at that place there were so many totes required that they wouldn't have fit along the frontage. But for this size of development, those totes would also fit along Buckley, which I'm not sure where the garbage gets picked up right now, but that's fairly typical in Squamish too, for them to drive along a main street, pick up all the garbage and keep going. But we still think it's probably better to contain that garbage within our property. We're trying to get to landscape. There. Okay. Really use your imagination. Oh, totally.
I guess you've got the drawings in your packages anyway.
Oh,
There we go. I was going to start by saying it's a very simple and pragmatic approach, but that's even wrong when you're looking at a blank screen. But it is a very simple, pragmatic approach. So the street frontage, the east elevation street frontage is bookended on either side, which you can see, I think, actually in James elevation, with landscape treatment to give it a more dominant presence to the street edge. And then adjacent to the sidewalk, we've got layered planting, Amelanchier trees, ground cover planting, and then shrub planting behind. And then each of the 5 units has approximately 77 square feet of patio, 70 square feet of patio space, I believe. Each one of those is intended to be pigment dyed concrete, flush at threshold level and doorway level at the front. You see the same pad at the front, marking the entrances. And then we have communal play space at the Buckley Road side of the property, each separated with privacy hedging and again Amelanchier tree planting.
Sorry, Julian, can I interrupt you for a
Yep.
second? Sorry, it's just been pointed out to me that the landscape plan on the screen, the one that I brought, is
Oh,
outdated.
that's an old
So some
Yeah.
of the site planning changes that we made don't show up there.
So the one we have.
The one you
one in
have
your
in the
package
package
is
is the-
correct.
yeah. Sorry, I wasn't looking at that one.
Oh, Allison noticed.
The site to the north side is screened by evergreen hedging. With the current road with fire access width as is, it's tight, but we think it's doable with 4 foot high hedging that will eventually grow up to 6 feet. And screening the garbage totes, we are proposing that we have a modular metal trellis system with vine planting that allows us that little bit of a bit more space to get the totes in there, and also provides us some screening on the north side. I think that's pretty much it, other than to say the southwest side, we've got an enclosed urban agriculture area, 5 urban agriculture raised beds provided with bench seating and then surrounded again by evergreen hedging.
Did you want to say anything about the streetscape?
I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, okay.
just the layered. I mean, the planting along the streetscape is intentionally layered with ground cover, shrub planting, and then trees. They're clearly not street trees. They're inside of our boundary, but the idea is that they match the trees within the site. All Amelanchier grandifloras, so very nice street tree.
Thank you. Sorry about the mix-up.
And there's just the detail of the trellis, the raised beds, and then some of the paving treatments.
the trellis system is it's an off-the-shelf system that's available to buy as a modular system. It's very high quality in terms of its build, and then the intention is for everyone plans to colonize it.
So just while you're looking at that materials board, Chris, that the printout on that board isn't very accurate. But the colors in your packages with the elevations, that's a truer representation of the colors and the materials palette that we had in mind. I think that's it for our presentation.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start with questions. I can start that. Nice package. There's not. Number one would be the garbage totes. There's some discussion on that. Is that just to bring out during collection day, or they are going to be there all the time?
No, that's right. The idea is that the garbage totes would live inside the garages.
Yeah.
And that on pickup day they get rolled out into that sort of paved area that's ready for them to kind of sit there.
Yeah. Okay. And is there a fence along the south side or no fence between the two lots? Or is it so? Yeah.
No fence.
No fence between the two lots?
No, just the existing landscape buffer.
Sorry?
The existing landscape buffer from the other, the adjacent
So
site.
that's the adjacent.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great.
I think though that the adjacent site needed to be lifted by a couple feet, so I think the intention there is that there'll be like a row of lock block. Is that right on that side?
I think it's going to be landscape on top.
Landscape on top of it. Okay, sorry. But there is a sort of a grade difference between those two lots.
Okay.
And then is there any landscaping on the lot directly to the south of it along that edge?
On our side?
No, on their side.
On their side, yeah.
Yes,
They
it's
have
all-
a.
It's quite extensively.
So
Yeah.
that's the property line.
So they've already vegetated that entire property.
Oh,
edge.
right, okay, I keep thinking that we're looking at this.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's
Wrong way
more
around.
units. Okay, got it.
So you know what? This diagram might help more. I only brought that up yet. That's the
Oh, yes, okay.
text.
There's no chance to share the fire lane with them, so you don't have
These are all bins
two
here,
roads.
right?
You know, we did look at that early on. However,
There's no
because
fence,
that
it's
strata
just
has already been
Right.
established, it's very, very hard to share.
Yeah.
I think that. Yeah. I mean,
That are my questions. Go. Start?
Sure. Apologies if you mentioned this, but the green screen on the last page, sorry, could you just highlight where that's going?
Sure, it's right behind the garbage totes. So right.
Oh, just right there.
Yeah, in that small section right behind the garbage tote. So right now they kind of look like little shrubs, but it's actually shrubs planted on
Yeah,
the green
they're
screen.
vines on the screen.
Okay. And I did see somewhere in the package about a variance for parking width. Is that?
Our original application requested a variance for parking, but we've since modified the design so that we have full-size parking widths within the garages. We
Okay.
might still be, and I need to verify this.
It's in the, I did read it in here. Just as the updated drawings show, there's width within the garage, but still the access still does not comply to our.
Oh, the 6.5? Oh, okay, so what Carrie's talking about.
No, the parking itself. Within, the parking within the garage.
The parking width is now 9 foot each.
So they're supposed to be 2.75 for
Right.
width per stall. And so they are within the garage, but the access to them is still hasn't been altered.
Oh, so we need
So the
to make
garage door
wider
is
garage
too
door.
small. It's way, okay.
Well, we've shown a standard 16-foot residential size garage door, so I would have to look to see, I mean, you might know.
Yeah, 16 is standard.
16 is standard, so, you know, the idea is that you can park into your space, but you have clearance on either side of
Mhm.
your car door. So, I mean, do you know what you can get
Get an
18?
18.
You can get 18.
You can.
Yeah.
17 is very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, sorry, we assumed that a residential double-wide garage door.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But there's no variance in the actual width of the stall anymore?
not for the
inside
stall,
garage?
just, I guess, now for the
Oh,
garage
okay.
door.
Okay. Those are my only questions.
Yeah, so, and sorry, just going back to that a bit, you know, we do prefer having the 16-foot, not just for cost, but because we just like the amount of, like on that facade, rather than being all garage door, we'd like there to be some material presence, which is why we used that wood at the ground level, ground floor plane. So, you know, the more garage door you have, the less wood there be instead.
That's it, yeah.
Any guardrails on the roof decks, or is that within parapet?
Oh, yeah, there will be. So the way that the roof works, and so I'll have to act it out for you. So the roof comes up like this to a certain point, which is probably about 2 foot above the deck level, and then we'll mount a guardrail on the inside of that to the 3'6" level.
Which will be made out of?
Our usual
Thick wood.
aluminum, yeah, the aluminum with the glass
Okay.
inside, yeah.
In a black or something, similar to the roof?
Black,
Not to feed it to you? Okay.
No, it's
Probably a black to match the rest of the trim work that we've done everywhere.
But we will see about a 1'6" upstairs.
Probably, yeah.
Can you explain the queue and the material palette? Cedar slats onto hardy panel? Are they 2x2 slats?
Yeah, there would be 2x2 slats that kind of get finished on all sides prior to getting fastened to the hardy panel backing. So we probably need to have some strapping in behind like they're basically prefab panels that you would mount onto rain screen or something. Kind of system. Anyway, for this project, we kind of thought to add a little texture, a finer level of texture for that. Something we would need to work through with our envelope consultant.
For the adjacent property, is it to the south? Are you guys the architects on that? Okay. And same developer? Different, okay.
Similar, not same, but similar.
Okay. And that's under construction right now,
It
right?
is, yeah.
Jules Landscape, any comments on the informal play area? That's a little atypical for you, and I know districts pushing to have it be activated now. It's kind of coming into other areas too, so curious if you guys, since those comments come back, if there's been any more thought to how you could make that a landscape play area, not just one.
You know, if you like throwing the football around.
So
I
you-
think, you know, our approach with play areas is always try and be as flexible as possible with it. I think to be non-prescriptive about play is the right way to be, you know, which seems a little strange when you're looking at a big area of greenery, but I think that's actually more useful than, you know, like sticking a springy toy in a corner.
Like, could it be a landscape element? Like, as in, I don't know, a lawn or a boulder or a climbable tree, or is
Possibly,
there...
yeah. You know, I think
Yeah.
more abstract is the way to go, absolutely.
And there's flexibility in the
Yeah.
planning
Yeah,
side to propose that, it does have to be a play structure. So it
Yeah,
just has to be activated.
I'd rather see it as be something that is more, that engenders more imaginative use rather than something
Than
that's really
something
quite
overly
prescriptive and
prescribed.
very kind of, you know,
Yeah, because
that's a rocket ship, it's only ever going to be a rocket ship.
Yeah, because I just also want to point out the context a little bit more too. Like, I think obviously Buckley Avenue along this street area is in need of some upgrades. So I feel like by keeping that front yard area a bit open and flexible, that use can kind of adapt to the neighborhood over time. So I kind of like that idea that there's a little bit of opportunity there.
Just from a planning perspective, this was what was asked of the adjacent property to the south as well, and they were able to activate it with the community gardens. And the push from planning was because they are adjacent to a school ground, and they do have that open grass and the greenery fields and those open spaces just across the street. So that was the planning rationale for that recommendation.
This Strata Gardens is part of the open space though?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
The whole
um,
the backyards and that is basically the open space?
Well, actually, you can see in the diagram at the
Top one?
yeah. So it's these that are being factored into
Okay.
the open space. So nothing along the sides is being factored into the open space calculation, just the front and back. So one of the arguments is about not just the, you know, in lieu of the quantity, is also the quality or the function. So that's something we're trying to kind of sort out.
Okay, that's it for me.
Yeah, sorry, and the other difference between the adjacent sites, so Arbutus Grove and this one, is that with Sitka Lane, we've been asked to address the street more so than we were in Arbutus Grove. So I think by creating that very prescribed front yard, it actually creates more of a enclosed neighborhood for the townhomes, whereas in this version, there's more of an opportunity to connect through to whatever that street may become.
Okay. Me? Just in the drawings, Q is showing up on page A302 as black, and it's supposed to be natural.
Yes.
So the Buckley,
It's just, yeah, it's just not being rendered well.
but it will be, okay.
Yeah.
And do the cedar supports actually, are they functional?
The cedars.
Supports of the roof supports there, are they just decorative?
That's to be determined. I doubt that they will need to be structural,
Okay.
but they're there to kind of embellish that Squamish vernacular, if you will.
Okay, and I think that's all my questions.
The size of the roof deck, was that sort of maxed out to what it could be given the slope of the roof and
No,
the
it-
structural components?
Right now, the way it's determined is for the edge of the roof deck to be lined up with the bedroom wall below,
Mhm.
so that the structure goes kind of straight through. That's how we kind of determined it, and we thought that the more space there was between the adjacent roof decks, that the more likely they would be to have some privacy between the different neighbors and to actually be used. Yeah.
So just to clarify, sorry if I've asked this already, but so there's not going to be, so on the south side of the property, there's going to be a small retaining wall concrete block to adjust to the elevation change. And then on the other property, there's landscaping,
That's right, yeah.
but there's not, so there's not going to be any sort of actual fence between the two properties.
Not at this point, no.
Okay. And is there anything being done, I can't really tell from in here, but with the play area being on the east end of the building, is there anything sort of being done beyond just delineating the walkway into that, the easternmost unit, into that, not sort of ending up getting commandeered by that unit as part of their play area? Like, just with that access coming in, rather than it coming in at the
Right,
at
like
the,
how do you define it
the
as
north
a-
elevation, it's
Yeah.
coming in on the side,
Yeah.
that it could end up being kind of almost perceived by either the other residents or the resident of that unit as being their space.
Right.
I was gonna make that exact comment because I have an end unit.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
Children.
grass.
I
That's
don't
a
know
good
if they're,
Mm.
if that was considered at all, of a
it's
way
good
of
point,
sort
you
of
know,
making
what
it.
we had, we focused more in on making sure that that end unit had a defined yard, because they actually have a different backyard situation than the adjacent lots. So I don't know if there's a strategy. So, you know, we were more concerned about creating that private space for them, and yeah, we haven't really, I guess, defined our true edge between what is the private
Communal.
versus the
Yep.
communal
Well, and it
in
would
that spot,
also, I was wondering too about what the intention is of sort of the flow to get to that play space because of the fact of that end unit being pushed back even further up against the southern perimeter of the property. It's like, would the intention be that kids or what have you would actually walk around the back of it because there's not that much space left?
Yeah.
Versus the intention being that you would go out on the north side of the building and walk around and then enter that play space
Right.
from that end.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it would make more sense to access it from the north side because
Yeah.
you will be passing, like all the residents would be passing through that area. So if there was a way to invite them into that shared common space, that makes more sense. Because I feel like what the premise is to try to keep the backyards private for private use and to kind of direct the common, activities to the driveway and over to the
Yeah, and
to the front and back.
most equipment that kids play with is stored in the garages, so it makes sense for the circulation to
go
basically
that
pass
way.
by the garages.
So yeah, I almost wonder if having some sort of very low, non-invasive fence border perimeter thing almost
Right.
blocking off the whole backyards there so that it would discourage people from going
Through the
from the back of the units this way, then it would almost like
Right.
and this there being like an entrance into it from the north end of the park so that it keeps it private. I could just see that if you ended up with somebody really grumpy living in there too, it could create a really bad
Right.
situation in there.
Yeah, no grumps. Okay.
I think that's all my questions.
I don't think I have any. They've covered a lot of my questions already. Thanks.
Same with me.
Okay.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
Why is it that the entrance was on the side for that end unit versus the same as the other ones? Was it to articulate that?
A little bit to articulate the Buckley Avenue so that there's actually a front door facing onto Buckley. The other thing that happened is we did have the exact same unit as the other ones on the end, but it just kind of went a bit too far into that front setback. So we were trying to address a few things. One, try to pull it out of the front yard setback while creating that more of a presence on Buckley. So we did have a version where there were both doors, a door facing the driveway and another one facing the side. But in this version, it just became too many doors. So we do like the idea that we're thinking about a residential a residential building that has street presence, and what is that? Like, what is the street presence of a residential building? And mostly it's a front door with a light and a street address. So.
Okay. So all our questions, we'll roll to comments. I'll start. The only comment I have is, could there be some treatment on that west elevation for the neighboring, in favor of the neighboring houses on that west side? Done a lot of work to keep that street frontage on the east elevation, but could there be something on that west elevation?
In terms of the landscaping or the
No,
facade?
the facade.
Oh, okay.
Quite a bit of setback there. Okay. Parking.
Yeah.
I think it reads flatter and harsher than maybe.
Right.
it would.
Okay. That's my comment.
I like what you've done with the Buckley elevation. I remember we talked about this on the previous application, and I actually drove by there today,
Yeah.
the one that's under construction, and I don't think enough was done to that elevation. So I like the idea of moving the door around the side there. Don't have any issues with the proposed setbacks. The open area one, I definitely think that if it's left the way it is now, that end unit will end up using it and no one will feel inclined to use it. I speak from experience because I have an end unit and nobody does come around there, which is great for me. But so I would like to see that activated in some way to encourage people, everybody to use it. I don't know how you do that in such a way, something more natural like a climbable tree or, something to that effect. My only comments.
think I agree with the elevation does a lot for the street presence to the side. I think maybe just the proportion of the sidewalk to get to that needs to be reproportioned. It
Right.
feels like a bit of a jig and a jog, and there's not enough of a front patio space for that entrance. So I think just by doing that might define that as a front door, and then the play space could be separated, you know, probably by some sort of hedging or something along that side walkway. I'd like to see the entrance porch ideally extend out into the apron a bit, so it's not just flush with the building, but somehow those front entrances are delineated in, whether it's flush with the adjacent apron or,
Sorry,
like,
I don't.
right now they're inset, right? I think it's on the landscape. Right now those,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and I think it'd be nice if somehow, because you're dealing with such a small apron, that those extend out. So when you're looking down the development, you see front door rather than flat, flat, flat. And if that's not possible in the articulation of the building, I think in just a simple step up or something, or if it's flush, you're doing the stained concrete, so I think that would be nice. I quite like the limitations on the amount of decks we're seeing. Quite often we see so many decks, it really takes over the architecture. So I think the smaller roof decks are great and appropriate to the size. And same with the back decks, and the back kind of patio space screened by those trees and plantings, I think is really great, rather than just seeing the back of these garage unused spaces that we see quite often. So I think that's a really nice progression. I'm skeptical of the slat detail holding up over time with not much protection on that. I think the ground floor is great, and it's got, for the most part, an overhang, and you've wrapped it in a few areas, which might get hammered a bit, but I think I don't think it needs that extra texture, or maybe it's darker, maybe it's stained similar to that panel, to the black or something. I just think it's probably, knowing water's gonna sit on those and once you chamfer them all, it's gonna get. So I think the building's got enough going on, and the ground plane's really strong. Great to see some color in the doors, and
What's the overhang over those?
well, I think over those bays, not much.
I,
I think like here, it's got,
it's
I don't
only
know,
1.6.
but over the bay window projects, so there's not much on those. Yeah, I'd love to see the play space activated by something as simple, like for me as a parent, you could do a 20-foot long cedar bench where the parents can sit around and drink beer, and that's gonna activate a social, yeah, like I think
about a fire pit.
it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
play, I think it just has to be getting people to hang out. I mean, we wanna do that on our front sidewalk because everyone's playing in the street. So I think quite subtly it could make it space. I'm all for lawn, and a flat lawn is amazing for kids, so yeah, something. I'm skeptical that, I guess that tote is just for garbage day.
Yeah.
It looks too tight. I wish it could be at the end of the fire truck lane.
Yeah, we potentially could move it there. It's just not knowing how far Carney's is willing to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my only thing, because I think that would be nice to be more solid hedging
Yeah.
and put that back maybe against the urban agriculture area where people are gonna want compost or something anyways, so. And I think for the screening on the south is maybe more of a planning. I think it's a tricky precedent because it's the same developer. You could probably get away with using the adjacent project's landscape, but if that's a requirement in the zoning bylaws, I think it should be screened or hedged along that whole property line on both properties really. Yeah, and, I mean, subtle, but I think the comment to extend and delineate the backyards, you could do simply, it's probably more practical. But otherwise, I think it's a clean project and well developed from kind of past iterations we've seen of townhomes and such, so. That's it for me.
Okay, my comments are similar to Richard. The west elevation of the building just needs something. You've got, it might be just extending some black hardy or something around the vertical window of the left. It's something so that when you're looking that way that it's not such a sea of still water. That's what it's called. I think that the decorative cedar supports kind of seem unsubstantial when you're looking at them sideways, and I would just get rid of the upper ones. I think there's enough good things about the building that it's not really necessary. I think a short fence on the south elevation on the retaining wall might be the answer to, or a solution. I'm not convinced. My first thought when I saw it, I'm not sure about the light colored garage doors, whether or not they need to be a little bit darker. That's just, might be just me. That's all my comment.
Okay. I really like the fact that there are roof decks on there too. I think that would be, it's great when there's not a lot of access to the outdoors in these townhouse units. Overall, I really like the look of it. I think it'll be a welcome addition to that area. I would agree. I think the south border of the property, I think that it would be good to have some sort of low fence, something along there to keep people from just walking right through the landscaping between the two properties too. If there's kids, that kind of thing, I think it could end up getting kind of trampled and worn looking after a while. Really, like the community garden idea for use of public space is really inventive and great for Squamish. The play area, I think having some features that make it a family gathering zone too, like Chris had mentioned, is a great idea too. So it's going to encourage kids to use it if they're going down there with their families, because if kids are younger, they're only going to go down there with, so if you make it comfortable for adults, they're going to be more inclined to use it. But I do feel like if that, from the Buckley side, having the entrance door to that east unit does break it up and make it more inviting, but I think again, some very low, it could be like not even 3 feet high, like it's just almost like a token thing that separates what that walkway belongs to those people that live there and allows people to use. It's almost like having like a deck with no railing on it. You're actually not going to go right up to the edge. You almost need to have a railing in order to feel like you can use the whole space. And continuing that right to the south property line so that it does change the traffic flow to come in from the driveway side rather than people running up and down the back. Give each unit a bit.
Remember lawnmowers have to get through there.
Yeah, but I don't mean like each individual unit, but even if there's there's a gate, it's just more of like a reminder to kind of go around so that there is access there for a variety of reasons. The suggestion about moving the garbage can area back further, if the garbage and recycling trucks are already having to turn in there anyways, making them go a little bit further so that it keeps it from being this. If they look neat in the drawings when they're all lined up, but you know what it's going to end up looking like one day a week in there, and if things get left. I think that's all. Comments? Yes.
May I go? I did miss one thing. It's just an addition on the south elevation. The garbage cans for all of the other units are going to be seen very visibly by the first 3 units anyways. So there should be definitely some screening that's put in at that east.
From the property to the south.
Yeah, because looking this way, you're going to see that one day a week it's going to be really. Okay, that's it.
All right, I appreciate the consideration of the facade treatment on Buckley, I think that there's room for it to feel even more like the front face as opposed to the side of the facade. Reiterating some comments about the front space, some sort of delineation between the unit and the shared space, I think is quite important. I agree that more activation would be required. Would encourage some more trees and seating elements. I agree that, you know, a nice big open lawn can actually serve as a great function, but with a few additional elements, it would really enhance the usability of the space. In terms of the shared space in the back, I think it has many similar opportunities and questions as the front in terms of, does it actually just belong to this back unit? The entry to it is via a parking stall. So is there opportunity to open it up a little bit as it's adjacent to the parking, just to make it feel a bit more public, or public to the users of the buildings? In terms of the south edge, I think there's some validity in using the adjacent parcels planting, but I would reiterate that a small fence would be very useful, and maybe some soft plantings, maybe not a harsh hedge on the edge, but maybe some soft plantings where the fence would almost disappear within the plantings of the two developments, so it would feel a bit more naturalized along that edge and maybe soften this very linearness of the lot. And then in terms of the paving, because it's so substantial, I would encourage some consideration with the materiality or the permeability of that drive aisle, just to add some more interest to it because it's so substantial on the site. Those are my comments.
Most of my comments have been made already. Just three things. I think if the driveway can be made of permeable concrete, I think that would be a really nice feature to start setting a tone. The second one is, I think, defining the green spaces for each unit is, I think that's been made clear. It's a very good idea. Also to protect the people who don't have children from people who have too many children. And the last one is that the rooftop deck, I think, is a great addition, just because the other deck will probably have a barbecue on it and a couple of other things and be close to the kitchen. And as such, I don't think you're going to have a lot of privacy there anyway. So I think if you have another couple over and you're in a 3-bedroom unit, 3 seats is not enough. I think it should be double the size. And I think in ideal world, half of it should be covered, because half the time here we have rain or worse. And then you can at least put your furniture under the covered area.
Yeah.
So
Are you referring to the patio?
the rooftop
Or the
deck.
deck?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I think your cost increase is going to be next to nothing for that. And so, yeah.
Can I make it go back one more? I think that's a great point. Or you're not over height. There's no height variance. is there?
We're right on the button.
This would be nice to have almost a covered deck up there more than anything. Would be great to hide all this stuff. And the other one I think we should maybe, that we glanced over that I forgot to comment on, is just how everyone feels about really the setback variances.
Yeah, I was just about to comment on that.
Because you could take out one unit in totality and all of a sudden it fits. So at this, you know, it's great and it's a nice proposal, and I recognize the challenges with infill and angular sites, but they're also asking for some substantial reductions, and I think it's probably adding up to an extra unit, I would guess.
It's an extra unit, but it's not
Or-
more area, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Right.
Yes, so, you know, the logic there basically is that, you know, given the amount of GFA that's permitted, it could be divided over 5 units or 4. So we were really hoping for 5, because that gives us the size of unit that we're after also. So 4 units, by maxing out that density, you're creating quite a big townhome, which, you know, kind of could see.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I think it's good, and I think the parking is well addressed, which, again, over the past few years, I think we've seen some big challenges with it. So this kind of really
It's nice to see the side by
restricts where,
side.
yeah, and it restricts where people park. We're not seeing a tandem garage. We're not seeing
Yeah.
a single car and an outside big apron. So I
Then,
just think everyone should
yeah.
comment on it.
And both on the north and on the south side, most of the issue is more with the bay windows and that level of extrusion. So it's not like right on the ground level where you have that the variance requirement.
Actually, to clarify, yeah, on these the side yard variance, It's basically, it's none of the livable space that projects into that setback area, so the bays don't project into that area. It's just the level 2 deck that projects into that space. And the way that the zoning bylaw is worded, that roof overhang is permitted, but not if it has a railing. So by suggesting that deck, that's why we need that setback variance, not due to living space.
And from the street side, sorry, Carrie, from the street side, I think the compromise in where the housing is today, the housing problem is today, I think it's a reasonable compromise. At the same time, I think we have to look at you to see what type of precedent does it set, and if we want to go there. Because at the end of the day, this size unit is very valuable as an additional unit, and we just have to ask ourselves is that what is the, because that's the big unknowns. What type of precedent does it set?
I think the big,
I just want to clarify something just around the lot coverage, specifically for this zone. The site area for the zone doesn't even meet what the zoning bylaw says is a minimum standard. So the lot coverage that zone asks for is equivalent to a certain area, site area of a certain amount. And they're actually less than that. They're about 30% less than that. So, but they are still and they are allowed to meet that lot coverage that way. So just in terms of when we're looking at variances, that is a consideration for planning as well that way.
So it's not typical for ADP to consider variances the same way that you guys do. If they substantially don't meet it, would you recommend, and you've mentioned this before, just to go for a rezoning and see what council say about this?
We've suggested a few different options. One of the options was to do a rezoning for higher density, so more compact uses, or to remove one of the units to actually comply with the setbacks, both at the rear and the front.
So I think the other option that was explained is that it can, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we've been told the project can still move forward through the process without planning support and be presented to council. Because you're right, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say guesswork, but this is actually a neighborhood that is quite in transition. It's halfway somewhere. And one thing we've been told also is that, the development permits, any of the approved development permits are not meant to act as precedents. So everything should still be considered on a case-by-case basis. So, one of the things that we believe works well for this project is that we're not just trying to create the most area. We're actually still also trying to create good quality. So I don't know how that balances in.
I have a question for you then, Jen. It's like, typically when people start asking for variances, they bring something else to the table, some green initiative. Did you guys, is there any, like if you look at the state code and the BC building code, are you guys aiming for a much higher standard? Or what is the green initiatives that you have brought to the table here? Or what other initiatives have you brought to the table?
We're basically, in our opinion, we're meeting the intent of the zoning bylaw, the existing zoning bylaw. So, we're not asking for extra density, and we're not asking for more lot coverage or site coverage. We're basically working within the parameters of the site, and then also given the neighborhood, like there's lots of non-conforming existing homes there, and we are just kind of testing to see what the appetite is for, because it is a choice, right? But where I talked about, do you want 4 larger units that may not be affordable anymore to younger families, or do we try for this?
So
I think that.
The way you're answering that tells me that there's no additional green initiatives, and that you don't want to go for the rezoning process.
We haven't contemplated any of those other routes yet.
Because one of the comments, sorry, Liz.
Oh, sorry. What is beyond the minimum though is the roof deck and that kind of that is an offering that isn't typical to every townhome. So that is already an extra cost to this project.
Because one of the comments that you made is that it's already typical in this neighborhood that there's so many things that is not conforming. And we don't want to set a tone where, like you said, development permits are not setting precedent, but they inevitably are setting a tone of there's lots of things that is not conforming or not conforming.
So ultimately, I think you've raised a good point too, is that there's planning pieces that we look at, but here at the committee, at the advisory design panel, the idea is to look at the development permit guidelines specifically. We do, at this committee, let you know if there are any variances on the property, and why this one particularly was brought up is because it does impact one of the guidelines in terms of the impact to neighboring properties. And so that was why that was a consideration for you guys to discuss here. And we do like to get some of your opinions if planning and applicants are trying to negotiate and look through different options. Eventually, ultimately, the decisions that you make here go to council, and council makes the final decision on this. So even whether it's staff supported or not, council does have that final decision. And what they're looking for from this committee is direction as to, yes, we approve this, or we'd like to see changes here, or come back there. So just to clarify the process.
I mean, I think on an angular site has challenges if we want these awkward buildings, and I think having more units with sufficient parking is more valuable to the community, I would say, than bigger units maxing out the FAR.
Well, it's also important to note that this isn't exceeding the footprint of what's already there. Like, there's already an existing.
But it's so different than what's happening.
Yeah.
No, but you're going from basically, like, in terms of the frontage on the road, it's not, the variance isn't asking for more than what's actually going on there. It's literally almost like the same footprint from what we were shown there, of where this is encroaching on the front. And with Buckley being so wide, like there's such a wide edge to that road too, so, which is different than if you're talking about it adjusting the setback and there's like a sidewalk right there and a road. Like, I think that visually makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think it's a good solution.
I
And I think the
don't think it
parking's a big
negative-
one. No, I don't think it negatively affects the neighbors.
any of the neighbors, which is why I don't have an issue.
So from the ADP's internal discussion, and based on what you just said, Kerry, do you want us to make a comment on, yes, this is acceptable, or do you want us to make a recommendation, it's like, yes, this is acceptable, but maybe they should do this and this and this as a compromise?
You could, as it pertains to the guidelines specifically, in terms of from your professional opinions, it doesn't. If you feel that it doesn't impact the neighboring properties, then that's how it should be reviewed, and that's how it should be stated.
Yeah. Because the way I see it is that yes, we really like the product that they're offering, but they're asking for variances, and that sets a tone no matter how you do it.
But does it negatively affect the neighboring properties of the community? I would say no.
No, but
The setback variances.
yes. But what we don't want is for the next side to come and say, well, this neighborhood already have a lot of non-conforming stuff. Okay, so
But they're saying it's
That's not
not
what we're talking
precedent
about.
setting.
yes, but
It
they
always
still
is.
come and say the neighborhood already have a lot of
But
non-conforming
they still have
stuff.
to go through the process.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that maybe we should say to them, okay, we would recommend to the staff, they should meet a higher energy level, EnerGuide or whether it's a BC step code or whatever it is, so that there's a compromise. There must be
Oh,
two
we
sides to
started that
this.
downtown, right? More density and height, and they go to Whistler's
Yes,
installation values.
yeah.
It's then you're getting,
We're kind of fishing here, right?
Yeah,
We're
so
trying
one of
to
the
see where
questions
it's
I guess that would be relevant to you is, do you see a concern with having different setbacks for different buildings along Buckley? So right now, so for the south property, it does meet that setback, and then for this one, having it encroach closer to the street now, again, what would other properties look like? Is that important to you guys, having a linear kind of setback along a streetscape? And if not, that's kind of the design side of
I
things.
sort of have a comment also, because I understand what you're saying when you look at the number of variances and the type of variances that can be, alarming. But I do think that it does need to be considered case by case. So I think as an ADP, you could say that generally speaking, these types of variances can be problematic or unsupportable, or however, in this particular case, due to the, whatever the reasons are that it may be less of a, so in that case, you know, you're setting a tone for evaluating things on more of a case by case.
And given the shape of the lot, and it's not like the entire east facade
We
is
have a bigger
encroaching on
setback
that.
on most of it, really.
Exactly, like if you're gonna take
That's what I
the
just-
average and calculate the average of it, then you're fine. And maybe in this case with lots going along this part of Buckley, maybe that's what has to be taken into account too. Because when you're driving down the street, it's much more broken up than it would be if the building was actually parallel to.
I think we can make a decision here.
That can be roundtable discussion? Yeah.
Because I can tell you guys, when on the Board of Variance, we usually looked at three things. When people came for a variance, we looked at, is there a loss of privacy? Is there a loss of views? And is there a safety concern? Like, is there snow going to dump on someone else's property or anything like that? So in this case, you might say there's none of the above, so that there's no compromise in that way. I'm just thinking that you buy your property and your neighbor now, you understand that there's going to be a certain tone for this is going to be the standard. In a perfect world, this will be considered on a case-by-case basis. We just have to be very careful on where we draw the line, and thinking that we can draw the line consistently every time will be very, very difficult.
You're right, because you're not a Board of Variance, you don't have the.
Yeah, and tomorrow the board, the ADB changes and they set a different tone, and yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, let's leave that to the council.
Yeah,
Make that
exactly.
decision. Okay, so we have 4 recommendations. A is we support and do not need to see this project return. B is we support and we have the following, staff can resolve the following recommendations. C is we'd like to see this return. And D is we don't support.
I'll make a motion for B.
Second it.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. B.
Can I get confirmation as to some of these recommendations, just clarity around the setback one particularly? I feel like I've got a consensus, but I don't know if we've written that directly in the minutes. I guess is there anyone
I
who
think it
knows?
was.
Well, I think
Yeah,
As
so
it pertains to the
as a
guidelines,
whole,
you guys
I
think?
think support the variance.
Because after this meeting, so based on option B, Carrie and I will work through whatever the ADP recommendations are. So some of them are very clear about, defining the private from the more shared front yard space. That one's very clear. And I think she was just saying if we're going to be working on the other recommendations, it just would be helpful to know what those.
I just want to know what to bring to council.
I don't have a problem with the variance for setbacks because of the angularity of it. I feel it doesn't negatively impact the adjacent properties.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that for the comment section.
I think the conversation though, to what you were saying, I think there should still be a conversation about the validity of asking for, if you're asking for a variance, do we then ask for something else in return? Do we? I think that's still a valid conversation for you to have with the design team.
Yeah, so here's a great example as to how I think this committee has worked in the past. So with roofs, with flat roofs, especially downtown, what we're seeing is we have a guideline that says no flat roofs, but this committee has, and we've kind of come to a consensus that that's okay, but we want to see something else. So green roof, or show us some articulation here, or activate the roof, right? So having specific guidelines that are relevant to, having specific recommendations that are relevant to the guidelines specifically. So, if you're talking about a roof, then the suggestion is roof related.
But ideally
Right.
it's in the guidelines.
'Cause
Otherwise it's flavor of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I don't think we could ask, or say, the committee says the front setback, we'll support the front setback, but you have to do something else in the rear or something, or something totally unrelated. So I think is that helpful in clarity around giving us guidance that way? In terms of the other negotiation pieces, that's something that the planning team does work with the applicant on, trying to find that balance before going to council.
And I think in terms of the front setback, we talked a lot about activating that front shared space, and I think that is part of that give and take.
Exactly.
Can I just add one thing too, just like.
Do you want to let these guys go and then we have a round table?
No, this is actually comment, specifically about that the same, the same treatment of dividing off the play space and the private space on the east end of the building is also considered on the west side where the community garden is, and possibly making that, just so that the people in the community garden don't feel like they're intruding on this unit space and vice versa as well too. Good fences make good neighbors.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I think
Hedges all around.
Yeah.
Do you want those to?
Sure.
Just the
Thank you.
Packages.
Okay.
They all get recycled, I wouldn't mind putting them on.
Thanks, guys.
You do- you
Oh,
get
yeah,
to-
minute. Oh, done, keep going. Oh, you keep it. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
It's our developer.
Okay, the next one is council, status of recommendations to council. Evan? No.
Is that for Jonas to come in, maybe?
Usually.
Okay.
I wanted to leave a comment on this last thing. When a developer asks for variances like that, it is always to their benefit. There's a community benefit in that they provide an extra unit, and we have a real housing crisis and all of that. It's to their benefit. They're going to make a pile of money by selling these extra units, and they've got just the right market that they want all those things. They should give something back to everybody, and you do that through saying you will have to create a more energy efficient unit, or like you say, Whistler Zone 6 or whatever. There must be a compromise, a give and take situation. Or you just say everybody's rights are protected and say everybody just follows the rules, there is no variances.
But I think I find you can tell when someone's pushing it for the wrong rationale and maximizing it out and have really crappy balconies or really not generous enough bay windows, like a good project from a bad one.
Well, and they're also pushing the lot coverage.
Sure,
They're
they are.
pushing all the,
Absolutely.
This
So
could
I
have been the
agree.
same
And
old
this
thing,
is-
single
this is a
car,
difference.
tandem, like elements,
Absolutely.
Otherwise you'll get everyone challenging
They won't need nearly as much money.
variances.
Well, that's
I'd be happy to do a 2x8 wall if I can get another unit. It
Yeah.
works out all day long.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful the other way, that the barter is worth the squeeze kind of. And
Well,
I don't know
and I
if we're
think
there yet.
that's where staff needs to come in and draw a line, because in my point of view is that if you don't tell them, there will be a compromise, there will be a give and take situation, then the next guy is going to come and say, well, you didn't make them do it.
So we have drawn a line with this application, and they're aware that I'm moving this forward as not staff supported.
Mhm.
So that is our line, and we have had several discussions around that. And in the growing of this community, variances in terms of supporting them or not supporting them, it is a negotiation sometimes, but we also are, in terms of we need to consider the precedent that's set in this community as it's growing and changing.
It'd be nice not to have variances on every project.
Absolutely,
Really.
because the cornerstone of any variance is hardship. Now, hardship cannot be defined. Hardship is different for me than what it is for you, than for you. So that's why a border variance usually decides on a hardship. I'm telling you guys, there's no hardship here.
So it's different in terms of a zoning variance, and it is, at the end of the day, up to council to make that decision.
Yes,
And hardship doesn't need to be defined the same way as a board of variance.
Absolutely.
It's a little different.
Yeah.
And variances are there for specific, for lots that are of different orientations, or if there's unique cases that need to be made. It's just also, it is, when we see things, we see it community-wide as well. And sometimes you guys only see the development per se and have that development permit guidelines to follow and to be able to comment on specifically.
It seems though that nearly every project that comes in is asking for a variance. It's a very common.
There's some leftover
conversation.
zoning, leftover neighborhood plans, so.
We've got some,
Yeah.
that's a
So
good
it's a
point.
bit of both,
Yeah.
and this whole neighborhood, there's a lot of irregular shaped. And now there's some bigger constraints on properties with drive aisles and fire and some landscape requirements, so it does get tricky.
For sure.
I mean, you could see this draw a rectangle maxed out in the angled lot.
Yeah.
We'd have an uglier building, I would argue, less usable green space and fewer units that are bigger, so
I think that this is a unique project, but many of the ones that
Yeah.
we've seen are very typical
Sure.
squares, and they are,
Yeah.
like you say, building out to the max.
Yeah,
and
and they're
not
probably
really
unreasonable
answering.
requests. I wish we could there was incentives in the bylaws to barter.
And
But
that's-
it's a challenging thing, because
Yeah.
they have to be measurable.
Yeah,
Otherwise-
well, yeah, and that's why I think maybe if you guys come to us and say, this is what these guys are think, and this is what our recommendation is for us to support it, then we can say, yes, that's a reasonable recommendation. But for us to come and try and find recommendations is very difficult.
Well, our recommendation was to remove one unit. So, and then and I think that's a really good point, and we will try to do a little bit more of that.
But they push back and say, they'll reduce a unit, but you'll build just as big of a building.
And there's,
But they won't need the variances then.
Right.
Yeah. And,
But that's still one less family habitable, potentially affordable unit.
For 2 meters of just got.
Yeah.
I get it all, but,
yeah,
and they probably wouldn't, they'd probably chop a unit.
yeah, they'll make all the units a tiny bit smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then parking becomes an issue, that they won't have two
You wouldn't have two
stall
full
side by sides,
stalls.
which it's
Mhm.
rare. We haven't seen that very often,
Mhm.
these, even from AKA, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's hard.
it's a challenge, yeah, and we're looking.
Which means in this case, we didn't have enough recommendation options from you. Just removing one was too harsh. We needed something in between removing one and, like, even if you say to them, you need to meet energy step code level 5, make it passive standard. And then they can come and say, oh crap, or sure.
Or that $800,000 unit, we can put 50 grand into permeable paving, and
Yes.
I think
yeah.
the public would be interested in seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, you gotta have that
Well,
cheap list then.
Yeah, and there's different there's differences of what is important for this committee, and then
Yeah.
also what's important for the community, and what's going on kind of with our planning department and planning principles itself. So, we have different principles as to when we support variances and don't support variances.
Absolutely.
So they are a little different than just changing putting more trees in or something,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways. There was a comment I think was made at the start of this meeting, and what did it pertain to planning that you wanted me to relay to Asia? That was a part of the last application. Just in terms of what you wanted
having
us- the
a
report.
leaner packages, like so
Yeah.
that we didn't
What
like.
do your packages look like? Just so I
Well, they
know.
vary
The
so
first
much.
one.
Like the ones
The
from
first one,
AKA
it was-
are usually quite.
I'd say a single bound package with no last minute entries.
It's so hard to
helpful.
do the
Yeah.
last minute entries because you're trying to catch up to see what is now changed. And he kept referring to a civil plan. I don't think any of us had it.
No.
Did
I don't-
anybody
I
I
it?
didn't have
have
a
it.
civil
No.
plan.
No.
Okay, so sorry, these are the plans I haven't seen then.
Yeah, so
Alright.
we had the
So
original.
this was the original.
There's 3 pieces.
With this, and then this was handed out
Okay.
today, and then they had a civil plan they kept referring to.
And then all of
I thought it was just
the
me.
That we didn't
the
have.
letter sized
And then it was all
information that was
photocopied in
there.
here as well,
11 by 17
All
complete
11.
package.
which is just a
Well, we
complete
always
waste of
have one
paper.
in there that
Yeah, it
we,
shouldn't be there. Can I see
we
that
review.
package? Sorry, thanks. Yeah, no, I got it, thanks.
we always
That's-
have that in advance. But the concern is if they want to add last minute ones, it needs to be a rebound package. It
But
can't
there's
be-
no
Print
point-
this one up,
Yeah.
or do you
No,
already gave it
that's
to
the
you?
package.
Yeah, okay.
So there's no point in printing out
No,
all
there
of
isn't.
those.
No, so what we should have is, typically you'll see the report, which is, you'll see the agenda, you'll see our reports, and then typically we'll have we may have a few pictures in that report, I don't know, and then basically a chart that lists all the development permit guidelines and which ones are being met and which aren't, to review and to consider, and then that should be it. So you should have 2 of those, and that should be it.
Well, it usually has a drawing set in the back, which is very helpful because you can review it before coming here.
Well, that's the electronic version.
Right,
Yeah.
which is helpful.
The packages that come from the applicants, not the package that.
No, this is the app. This is the actual package that you picked up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're talking
So
about
this is
both
what.
now.
Yeah, we're talking about both.
Like for example, this, having this, one copy of this available for us to see and to look at, but like there's 10 pages of
And that was
paper
they
here
just
that,
gave
like,
you that today.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we actually literally don't, you could be a lighting expert, but we don't have time to review that stuff in that kind of detail, so
Or put it in this bound package for everyone. The one floating around is hard, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I'd say
Yeah.
11 by 17, single bound civil, landscape, architecture, and a material palette mandatory.
Yeah, and then when it's all bound together, then it's easier to refer
So
to.
civil is not required.
Sure.
So
But if
just,
they want to
if they
include
have
it,
it, yeah. What I'm hearing from this committee is that this was a one-off, strange one, I think, in terms of filing that. We'll make sure that those packages, they have to be done the Thursday before
Yeah, that'd be nice to
ADP.
get to.
They're all done, they're at the front desk, and that these agendas that we print out, I'll let the clerk know that, to remove the designs here, because it doesn't seem relevant, if you have them by 11 by
Yeah.
17
The,
already,
the
right?
civil drawings are actually quite useful to look at in terms of elevations, like.
They're just not
Well, just they
required.
refer,
to be done.
they were referring to it in their presentation. Well, have you looked at the grading
Yeah.
plan on the civil drawings? We're all.
But I mean, often, I mean, in packages that we do have civil drawings.
Yeah, even if
you know,
it's
so
just a
then you-
sheet or two with, and then it has the elevations, like in
But
this
they're not
case.
required for DP submission.
No, true, but this is something when this was, when it came around the first time, is the site grading was an issue that we brought up before, so it would be in their best interest to have
Let us know.
sectionals of the site included in that.
So I think that's a
packet.
note that we can recommend, just like we recommend bringing material boards, we recommend more visual presentations.
You
I
mandated?
think we mandate material boards, didn't we have?
Well,
that?
Do we mandate it
suggest,
now?
we suggested
Yeah.
it. I think it's good.
It's
And-
some- it's
And the
some-
context plan was another one, just like for French.
Yeah, the
All
context
of
plan is huge.
Yeah, Jane added that in, but that would have been
Yeah.
super helpful.
Mhm.
And Saltaire, all that, like what's around is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the context is
That could even
really,
come from planning, maybe, as part of your summary of the DP guidelines and
Yeah,
stuff.
we don't have those visual capabilities.
Well, you have the GIS, no, but even
Yeah.
just like, here's the property, aerial photo from the Squamish GIS.
It
Would
doesn't
you
need to be
prefer-
fancy,
No.
but you're right, it's.
Red
it-
line, here's the property.
Well, would you
It's
prefer, so this
good to
is
see.
always in our reports, so you get the context that way. Would you prefer that that's aerial view instead?
Yes.
I would,
Yeah.
Okay, for sure.
Because then we can see how it relates to the other buildings,
Landmarks.
and the, like how the other lots are actually laid out.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all coming here, so.
No, but if
We never thought of that.
There, you have that in there already.
Well, for example, even with this one, the lot that's immediately behind, that's
Yeah,
on
thank you.
Wilson, I think
Yeah.
that's Wilson there, is a very narrow lot. The house is right up at the front and it's all open. Well, that changes it completely than if there's a house with a, 5 or 7 foot setback immediately behind this property. Like, it's gonna make it,
Mhm.
how we see this read quite a bit differently.
Okay. We're not gonna get Jonas. So,
He's
we don't-
I
gone,
guess it was,
No.
did you guys expect an
No, we
update?
didn't. It
Okay.
was just,
Okay, then
but
it's
he was
probably.
here,
He's supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for all of them now.
but he doesn't have to give us any.
No, not unless there's any.
and we're having one May 4th, is that right, or no, at the beginning of May?
Yes, yeah, so we have a larger project coming on, so that's the waterfront landing. That's the one on May 4th.
okay.
And then
Yeah. Is that
Harley
it?
does the,
It's waterfront and to discuss the,
and Victoria Drive. We won't do the setbacks till the next.
okay.
Yeah, so on May,
By Victoria.
on May 4th, there's what, a large development, waterfront
Is
landing.
that a DP application or is that
Yes.
a pre?
Oh, no, it's rezoning.
They're in rezoning, but
Okay.
they want,
Pre-comments kind of?
comments on the layout,
Yeah.
the general layout.
Yeah. I was just gonna catch myself on saying that.
Okay.
And then there's Victoria, Union Victoria Drive. Its property's been coming forward there. And then on May, on the regular meeting, we have staff are gonna come in and talk to you about the public engagement that we did around setbacks, or that we will be doing around the setbacks downtown and the office space on the second floor. So we wanna get your opinions before we go back to council
That's
on
the
that.
extra meter and a half setback?
2.5 on second and third in Pepperton, and office on a number of places downtown for the second story office. So we'll give you guys an update on that, and then I also have another development project to bring forward on that date too. So we have a packed agenda for May.
Can it start earlier or is it gonna stick to the time, 2 o'clock?
Oh no, just packed agenda for May in general, because there's two meetings.
Right, so
Yeah,
4th and then still on that third week.
yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Let's adjourn.
Thanks guys, I'll bring those comments back to